Welcome to the 10th part of my series where I talk about a family line of mine, show you how I came to the conclusions that I did, what I know, what I don't know about them, and the purpose of this series, as always, is to give you folks a really good understanding for how each individual family line requires different tactics and strategies, and each line builds upon each other. So in the last one of these I talked about my Aronofsky family from Village Ample, Lithuania. And my second great-grandfather, Abraham Aronofsky, well, his mother was named Rachel Zelda Palkovich. And so in this episode, I'm going to be talking about what I know about her family, because anything that I have learned about the Aronofsky family has helped me in the search for my Palkovich family. I'm Yona Paley, and I believe genealogy is fun. Today, we're going to be talking about my Palkovich family, probably from Panemune, Lithuania. Now, in the various censuses of the Aronofskys, she shows up under the name Rachel, but there is one census where she shows up as Zelda R. So I knew that Zelda was a name of hers and Rachel was a name of hers. And this became really, really helpful when looking for birth records in Lithuania for my family, because on the birth records for my Aronofsky ancestors, it listed the mother's name as Rachel Zelda, which made complete sense. And she was married to Chaim Yosef Aronofsky. The records in Lithuania didn't actually mention what her last name was. And in fact, I even have her marriage record to Chaim Yosef, and that one still doesn't say her surname. But on a lot of the Aronofskys' marriage certificates in the United States, there came to be a consensus that the last name of my third great-grandmother was Rachel Zelda Palkovich, or Polkovich. The town that she's listed as being from on her marriage certificate is actually most likely not correct, as I'm going to get into. Now, what it says on Litvoxig is she was from Sekiski. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is a city in Lithuania. But I noticed that pretty much none of the other Palkoviches in Village Ample were from this city, and there were no records for any Palkoviches from Sekiski. So it was really, really confusing, and I'm going to get into in a little while where I think she was from and how I figured that out. But before that, we have to talk about her father, which is essentially where I'm brick-walled on the family. So on all the birth records for Village Ample, it usually lists the father's father and the mother's father. And on all of the records, it says that Rachel Zelda was the daughter of Moshe Beryl. So getting back to where they came from, well, if you look at all of the records for Palkoviches living in Village Ample, it seems that there's a pretty big consensus that they all came from this city called Panemune. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that one correctly either. But in the modern day, similar to Village Ample, is an eldorate in the city of Kaunas, but it was formerly a village. And according to the Kahila links page for Panemune, it actually was a number of different villages, which makes things a little bit confusing in terms of figuring out where everyone comes from. But you might ask, well, it said that she was from Chekiski. Why do I think she was from Panemune? And the reason for this is because on the Kahila Link's description of all the different villages, it says that there is a version of Panemune listed on a lot of the Yiddish documents which says Tsanusk, Poland. But then on the Russian side of the document, it says Panemune, which is in modern-day Lithuania. So I think that Sanusk or Chanusk, it sounds like something that could easily be mistranscribed as Sekiski. And this is just a really unfortunate part of not knowing, of the documents not having a huge amount of details, because even this researcher doesn't really know which Panemune this town refers to, but it does seem to be very, very consistent across the board that all the Palkoviches I could find in that area were from Panemune. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone on any of the Panemune censuses or even any of the other Lithuanian records with the name of Moshe Beryl Palkovich, and I couldn't even find any other family members of hers. But sometime around last year, I discovered someone who I believe is a brother of hers. I don't have any hard evidence, but I'm going to get into why I think this and show you just how you sometimes can follow these little leads and they can all build onto each other over time. So there was a guy named Abraham Selig Palkovich who, yes, came from Panemune, Lithuania and sailed to the United States in the early 1880s. And unfortunately, he died in 1900. He only shows up on one 1900 US federal census, and then he's dead that very same year. And I managed to find his death certificate, which doesn't even list his last name. It just calls him Abraham Selig. But I was able to contact the cemetery where he was buried at, get a form of burial that was applied for him, and sadly there just doesn't seem to be any further details on this Abraham Selig Palkovich. But when I was looking through birth and death records for the city of New York, I did manage to find the name of his firstborn son, who tragically died at just a few months old. And this son was named Moses Bear Palkovich. Now, Moses Bear, like Moshe Beryl, is actually the first time I've seen this name associated with the Palkovich surname, besides for the birth records of my great-great-great-grandmother, who lists her father on all of her children's birth records. So this was already huge. I knew that this was a pretty big lead, and sadly, this is one instance where I have a pretty high level of conviction of this relationship, but there just don't seem to be enough records to back this up or refute it. And so for right now, I have not added this person to my family tree. I'm holding on to these documents and to this potential connection, because sometimes you just don't have enough to take it all the way. Rachel's death certificate lists her mother's name as Celia, which I have seen as a version of something like Tzivia, but without having any Lithuanian documents for her, it's impossible to know what her mother's name was. So for now, that's essentially where I'm brickwalled, is my third great grandmother's father, Moshe Beryl Palkovich, who I only have a name for, and I have a good inkling of what town he resided in. Genealogy has the capacity to throw you curveballs when you least expect it, and I hope that it throws some my way sometime soon. And that wraps up our episode. If you like it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, I'm looking forward to bringing you more videos, as well as tips and tricks that you can use in your own genealogy research. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll get you next time.